Good morning, good afternoon. From my side, it's good evening. Thank you for joining in on today's session on bots and conversational AI. My name is Sudhir. I work in Microsoft New Zealand office. And today I'm going to talk about bots and conversational AI. I'm going to talk about why bots, and then we'll talk about some of the design principles whenever you're going to start the bots projects. Some of the principles you need to keep in mind, because generally what we have seen is people build the bots maybe because they have heard about the bots. It's new in the market, and when they put up onto the productions, the users may not give a good feedbacks, or the organization may not like it. And there are various reasons for it. It's not about the technology is not working. It's about the people's expectations from the bots, what your bots can do, and how they can relate with the bots, right? So these are the things that we're going to talk about, and then we'll talk about how you can build the bots with code or without code as well, right? So with that, let's get started. The first and foremost things, right? And what is the difference between the bots and the conversational AI? I'm not sure how many of you are working on the bots. If not, then probably you can think of bots as an which can perform a one or more automated task. For example, I have a weather bot which I've created. And what is the job of that bot is just to tell you the weather, right? So whenever you're going to put a message for the bot, say, hey bot, what is the weather outside? It probably going to call an API, and then reply you back with the answer, right? So what I meant to say is, it's kind of a single turn conversation that we have, right? Whereas when the bots enables to the conversational AI, that means we're going to have a conversation between human and machines, right? Uh, for example, let's say I'm build a bot which basically going to help users to basically apply for a credit card. So what happens is in that the bot generally asks various questions from the users, right? What's your name? What's your age? What's your salary? And so on and so forth, right? So that kind of a conversation is happening, and any point of time, user might say, "Hey, I have put up my salary wrong, and here's a new salary," and so on and so forth, right? So that means the state of the conversation is also required to be stored, and as well as some point of time, you need to understand the context as well, right? So that's where the conversational AI, there are a lot of AI services which basically helps you to build that capabilities. So you need to understand that, right? Now, bots are good. If you just have only one task which needs to be done from the bots, you can build and you can deploy it, and then what you can do is you can actually go ahead and if it is going to more complex conversation, you're probably going to need to have more of the AI services which is provided by the Azure uh, to inbuilt in it, right? For example, if you want to set up a calendar invite, right? So you need to ask various questions from the users and just go ahead and send that information. Why bots? Because if you look from the previous era, from where we're coming, we used to have the personal computers as in a desktop, where we have some application which we used to run in a UI or maybe in a command prompt kind of a screen. And then in 90s, we have internet, where users has the capabilities to visit the websites and search for the various information, right? And there were a lot of information that is available for the user, right, that they have to search it. Maybe even in a one website, if they want to search something, they have to actually spend good amount of time to figure out the information, right? And then the mobile era comes in, where we have all this information through the app in the mobile itself, right? Now then the bots comes in, right? And one of the reason I think the bots are pretty successful is now, because we have a lot of information, it takes a lot of time for us to figure out that information. Now think about it. You might have a smartphone today, right? How many apps that you have? You might have 20, 30, or maybe more than that, right? Now you need to keep on a think about it whenever you're going to use an app, right? So for example, I'm thinking, hey, can I book a flight ticket? So I need to think whether I have an app or on my mobile or not, right? So ultimately, I'm spending some time to figuring out that information. Similarly, on the internet. So for example, if I want some company's information, and if I'm struggling figuring out that information on the website, I'm probably going to call them on their office number and probably going to request for this information, right? I may get it, or I may not get it, but the whole point is you are spending some time over there, right? Now think about from the user perspective. If we are not able to provide the information the user are looking in a less time, then the user satisfaction is going to take the impact. Your user is not going to be happy with the search, or maybe with the website, or maybe the app that you have designed for them, right? Whereas if you have a bot, right, and you have been seeing the bots in various websites. So when the bots is there, you can generally ask a few questions from the bots. Hey, this is what I'm looking for a particular company, and the bots behind the scenes will do the search for you and give you the information. So just you are actually, one, you can actually saving a lot of time, and then with the bots, where while the bots are doing search, you can actually go and do the multitasking as well, right? So when you ask the questions, you can actually go and do some other jobs as well. Now, with bots, that's pretty famous, and people are building a lot of bots. I would highly recommend to look on to some of the design principles, because what happens is when you build the bots and deploy, user expecting a lot from the bots. They think that the bots can do anything and everything for them, right? So they'll start asking various questions, right? Now, if you don't have a better design in front of the user, then the user is gonna be disappointed by the bots, right? And they're probably not gonna come back and use that, right? So let's go ahead and talk about that, right? So first thing is the understanding the organization requirements, right? It is pretty important for you to understand whether the organizations is bot is going to be the absolute solution for them or not, right? You need to look into what are the existing approach that they are using, whether on a website's going to help, or maybe any kind of a serverless applications we build or a process we build can help instead of building a bot, right? Now, once you have the understanding and once you document all this information, and let's say you say, okay, it makes sense to build a bot for this particular requirement in an organization. Now, let's go ahead and understand what types of conversations is going to happen. That's what we call the conversation patterns. So it's going to be, as I mentioned, single turn or a multiple turn conversation. So you need to define that as well, right? Whether you're going to ask one question to the bot and going to send it information back, or maybe there are multiple information required from users, before the bots can provide the information. So it's right. Then managing the bot states, again, it's very important whether you're going to store the states of a bot in memory or maybe outside the memory itself. And the reason is whenever you establish a connection with the bots, what happens is the bots, you can actually go ahead and store the information in the memory. So any activity, so whenever you initiate a conversation, the activity gets activated, and then you have a one ID, right, into that. Now, let's say with that ID, I'm storing all the bot state information into the memory. Now, as soon as this session with that ID gets end, that information will be get erased from the memory, right? So it's probably good for you to actually store that information into outside the memory, maybe in a blob storage, or maybe Cosmos DB, or maybe any other data storing technologies, right? Now, other than that, you probably want to store the feedbacks or the conversations as well, right? I would highly recommend to store the conversations in your solutions, right? And that will help you to understand, whether the conversation with the users are going right directions or not, and what kind of questions user are asking. Maybe you have to retrain your model behind the scenes. So you will get a lot of insights about your bot's implementation and how users are accessing. So do store the information of the conversation which is happening. Now build a personality profile for your bot. Now that's very important for you. So let's say what happens is when you build a bot and attach to any of the channels, um, and that channel pops up and opens a window, and then it'll start asking a question, right? Um, as compared to if you ever work with Cortana or matter of the fact Siri, right? These bots has the personality attached to it. There are some voice, there are some name attached to it, there are some pictures attached to it, right? So whenever somebody's talk about digital assistants, these are the names that comes in your mind, right? Because we have this personality attached to that bots, right? Now, similarly, if you're building on a bot for a company, maybe for HR bot or a finance bot, it's always to give a name. Maybe you want to give a picture, a very nice, decent, picture you want to attach to it, or maybe if it is you're enabling a speech for your bots, you need to probably provide a sound to it as well, right? So that will actually give a user impression in the mind that hey, if somebody says, hey, we need HR information, they will quickly says, let's go to that HR bot, for example, right? Now, once you have all this information, it's utmost important to figure it out what are the bot framework capabilities that is provided, right? So the Microsoft bot framework provides various functionality within the framework, right? You need to understand that what are the functionality or the capabilities that are available, and maybe you need to design your bots accordingly. For example, if something, if one of the cards that you want to show into the bot is not working on the Skype channel, but does work in, let's say, in the Facebook Messenger, then probably you need to figure it out. Hey, can we go ahead and actually, based on the incoming message, figure out which channel we are getting the information, and then accordingly provide that. So let's say if the image is not supported, then rather than I can just go ahead and provide a link to that image if the user is coming from, let's say, Skype and not from the Facebook Messenger, right? Supporting technologies, you need to look into what all technologies that can be supported behind the scenes. Because bot is nothing but just a code, you can call any application provided the applications opens an API for you. So you can just call the APIs from the bot, get the answer and give it back. But for the AI, for example, language understanding, Q&A maker, right? So you need to understand what all services that you can leverage. And then we also have the Azure AI search, right? So you're not trying to put everything in a Q&A fashion, but rather you are leveraging different technologies as well, right? Then map the organization requirements, document that requirements, take a sign off from your stakeholders, because it should not happen that your users or your organization says, hey, your bot is not answering all the questions that we are requesting, right? If you don't have the documents or the sign up from them, you cannot go back and argue on that point, right? So instead, if you have the documents or the sign up from the users, you can say, hey, the bot is meant only for answer any HR related questions you have. You cannot go ahead and ask the finance questions from the bot because the bot is not capable to answer that, right? And then probably you're going to have a roadmap for your bot. So today we're going to have HR bot. After maybe a year, we'll have a finance bot, and then we'll probably have one master bot for the entire company, and then we'll have child bots for each of the departments within the organization, right? So all these requirements you need to actually put that in a document and take sign off from your users, right? Now, I think enough of talk. It's time to look into how we can actually go and build the bots, and from without writing a code to some word code, or maybe if you can write extensive code to build the very complex bot, right? Now, what I'm going to do is the first thing I'm going to start off is the Q&A maker. Okay. So Q&A maker is a service where you can actually go ahead and capture all the question and answer pairs and then build a model out of it, right? So for example, I'm going to create a knowledge base over here. And then I'm going to say, okay, let's go ahead and connect to my subscription. Tenant, and here's the service. If you don't have any Azure Q&A service, then probably at the first step, you're gonna create that service. And then you're gonna give a name to your bot. So what I'm gonna do is over here is, I'm gonna build a bot on this document. So if I scroll up over here, I have a Surface Pro guide, right? So I'm gonna use this to build my bot. So I'm gonna say this is my Surface Pro knowledge base, okay? And it is asking me for a link. I can provide a link so that it can extract out the Q&A pairs from it, or I can provide this information in a doc file or a PDF file as well. So for now, I'll just go ahead and take this URL and say, go ahead and extract from here. So I'll just go ahead and Control V, right? And I'm gonna enable the MultiTon. And this is, as a new feature that we have added in the Q&A maker. What it does is, as I mentioned earlier, if any question that you're gonna ask in the Q&A maker, you might get multiple responses, right? So how you're gonna handle that? That's what MultiTon can allow you, right? So it can basically provide you all the answers which is suitable. For example, if I go back to the documents again, and okay, and if I just go ahead and, sorry about that, scroll down, and if I'm going to scroll down, so as you can see, if somebody says, hey, how can I set up my Surface Pro 4, right? So it has 4 subsection over here, right? You can see charge your Surface Pro, you can connect to the cover or set up your Surface Pro, right? Now, what's going to happen is, when you enable the multi-turn and when you're going to ask, you want to set up a Surface Pro, the Q&A will basically provide you all these 3 options. And when you click one of these options, it's going to exactly provide you that information, right? Now, if you don't enable, that means you're asking for a single turn. So it's probably going to provide one or either all these 4 replies to you with the probability. And then based on your logic, you can actually show which one you want to show, the answer with the high probability or answer with the low probability, right? Now, I can say, just go ahead and enable that. And what is the default answer? And I can say, hey, I got few answers here. Please check below. Okay. Now, if you're going to add a file, you can just upload your doc file or a PDF file or any other supported file. Then you can actually go ahead and add a personality to your bot, as I was mentioning earlier, right? So there are pre-built personality that we provided. What that means behind the scenes is there are various Q&A pair that we already defined, which you can use. For example, I'll just go ahead and use the witty one. And the response actually, response basically changes based on the personality. For example, if I say friendly, then probably when you say hi, it's probably going to say hey, right? When it's going to be professional personality, then probably it's going to say hi, how are you, right? So that's the personality we're going to add. And let's go ahead and say create your KB. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Just provide your Q&A pair, and it will basically now going to extract all the Q&A pair from the PDF documents and provide me that information, right? Now, as I mentioned earlier, don't try to put everything in a question and answer, but rather try to look for other AI services as well, right? So it's still doing that. And now, as you can see, it basically gives me my source, it gives me the context, and here is a question user guide. So as soon as somebody asks for the user guide, it basically gonna say, hey, I got a few answers, please check here. And these are the various options that are gonna be available, right? Similarly, we added the personality, and as you can see, we have a predefined Q&A pairs that are available. So if you're gonna ask something like this, and that's gonna be the answer, right? So let me just go ahead and save this. And once it's done, Now, what I can do is I can do a test on the portal itself, right? So I'm going to say hello, and I should get a response back from the Q&A maker. And that's my response, right? And let's say, before I ask any questions, so let me just ask, how are you? Right? So this is the personality that I've added, and you can see the response, living the dream, right? Now let's go ahead and talk about some questions. So let's say user guide, and you don't have to type the exact questions that are there because it's a machine learning model. It basically do that job for you. So let's say I'll say, okay, I need a user guide with Windows 10, and I'll get the response back over here, right? And I can say now, hey, you are awesome. And let's see. Yeah, so you can see that flatly, I like it. So that's the personality we have added, right? Now, once we said, okay, this is pretty good, I like it. What I can do is now I can just go ahead and publish this knowledge base. And once it's done, it basically gonna give me two options. Either I can create a bots directly from here, as you can see, which is gonna take me to the Azure portal to create the bot. Or as you can see over here, I have a Q&A service, which basically provides me the information about the API endpoint, and as well as the endpoint key over here, right? So instead of creating a bot, if you want to call this Q&A maker model from any of your application, you can go ahead and do that. So let's say I'll click on the create bot, and it's going to take me to the portal. And you probably can think of how many steps that we have did over here to build the bot. So now I can say this is the bot name and everything is fine. C#. I don't need application inside. And if everything goes perfect, I should have my bots created in a 5 or maybe in a 10 minutes, probably. And let's have a look. Now, once I have the bot deployed onto the Azure, I can actually go ahead and add into any of the channels, right? So I can add it on to the Teams, I can add it onto the website, I can add it onto the Slacks, and there are other channels as well. Or moreover, if you want to add it a direct line channel as well, you can actually go ahead and do that. So the deployment is in process. It should come back in a minute. In the meantime, it's doing that. Let's go ahead and look into the other way of doing it, right? So the another example of building a bot is through the bot framework SDK, right? So the bot framework SDK is basically an open source libraries that are available. And what you can do is once you open a Visual Studio, you can download the templates, and then you can start writing your code. Okay, like as you can see on my screen, we're not going to get into the detail, but some of it we'll talk about it in today's conversation. Okay. Now, what happens whenever? Okay, so whenever a conversation gets started from the user, right? It basically sends the activity to the bot, right? So the the activity basically contains various information about the user, about the channel from where they're sending the message, about the IDs, and so on and so forth, right? So it's basically in a JSON file. It basically comes, right? And once it hits the endpoint, right? Based on the code that you have written, it basically gonna initiate a dialogue. Okay, so for example, here I have an example of a bot which basically kind of a support bot, which basically connected to my Lewis and as well as into my Q&A, right? So why I have implemented Lewis, because whenever a user gonna ask me something, I probably gonna understand what is the intent of my user, right? Until and unless you're aware of what is your user intent, it's pretty difficult for your code to route that request, right? So for example, if I'm going to run this application over here, and just since this is my development environment, I need to initialize my bot framework emulator so that I can test. And as I mentioned, the bot is nothing but, once you deploy, it's basically going to open an endpoint for you. So take that endpoint, go to the bot framework emulator, open your bot over there, and then provide API messages. And let's go ahead and connect that, right? So as soon as I get connected, as you can see, I'll get this information, right? So you can think of right now I'm putting as a plain text over here, but then you can actually go and implement a module which basically going to connect to your Azure Active Directory, gets the user information, what's his name, what's his location, what's role he is, and then you can let your user know what this bot can do. Okay. Now, over here, it basically gives you the trace. And then if you click any of these trace on the top, it basically gives you the information about the response, right? So let's go ahead and type something over here. I'll say hi. Okay. So as soon as I say hi, you can see it basically asking me, please ask your question, right? So what happens over here is if I click over here, right? This is the activity which went to the bot framework endpoint. And as I mentioned earlier, you can see the channel ID is emulator. Then it's going to have the conversation ID. It's going to have entities, who sends it, who's the recipient, right? And then it basically, you can see the Lewis trace. That means all the messages is went to the tree, to the Lewis endpoint. And here I basically getting the response back from the Lewis, and it says the intent of the user is greeting and the score is 95, right? So if I go back to my code over here, somewhere over here, I basically, if I search for greeting, here you can see, I'm basically checking if the top intent value is the greeting, then do some certain activity, right? All right, so let's go ahead and ask a question. So I'm going to say my computer doesn't work. Right? So as you can see now, it basically goes to the Lewis, my question. And here you can see that I basically get various information about the entities as well, right? So you can see the equipment, and I can see the text is computer and equipment type. This is the equipment type. So these are the entity that I get it, right? And my intent is support, and this is the text that I've got it. My computer doesn't work, right? Now, what I can do from the bot is once I provide this answer, right, and I can say, does it answer your question? Let's say I said no, right? I can actually go ahead and provide further information on a various cards. I mean, that's an example which I want to show you to the implementation of cards. So not all information or all the answers from the bot you want to share in the text, but you rather want to have a graphical UI, right, for your users. So if I click on the all cards over here, you can see there are various kind of cards that bot framework supports, right? So for example, even I can actually go ahead and set a YouTube link over here, and the user can actually go ahead and play the YouTube video um, within the framework itself. I mean, the user doesn't have to go out of these window to look onto the YouTube, right? So that means I'm gonna have my user focusing here itself, right? I'll just go ahead and stop it. And then if it's something I want to make it read it out, I can actually go ahead and do that as well. Okay. Now let's say I'm still say, hey, I didn't get the answer that I'm looking for. Now, instead of providing more answer randomly, which is not going to help my user, what I'm saying is now, hey, let's go ahead and talk to the technical support team, because I might not be able to help you, right? And if the user say yes, then this bot can actually go ahead and create an email and send it to the IT department, right? And if you want, you can actually go ahead and implement a handoff scenario as well, where you can say, hey, I want to talk to an agent. So then the bot will basically send a notifications to an agent, which is sitting in the IT department. And once that agent accept that request, then the bot is basically going to act as a bridge between the agent and the users, right? And then the conversation goes on over there. Okay. So that is that. And the, as you can see, because you're going to write a code, you can go to any level you want to do, right? And this is very useful whenever you're going to do the debugging or tracing what's happening, where the calls are going in the bots. It will be very helpful for you. And then you can save this transcript as well, so that maybe, if this is something you're doing for the test, you can store this transcript, so that later point of time you can have a multiple transcript, which you can maybe look into, analyze it, debug it, and whatnot, right? So you can have a multiple transcript for in the development environment as well. Okay. Now that's there, and let me just go ahead and stop this. And by the time, I'm assuming, if I go back to my portal, I should have, let me see, where is that? So this is the bot. Okay, is that the one? Yeah, so let me go into the dashboard. And as you can see, my bot is up and ready. So let's just go ahead and test in a web chat. And let's go ahead and ask some random questions to see how the bot is gonna react on those questions. So I'm gonna say, can you build a rocket for me? Some random question, right? So, okay. So bots basically sends me one message, hello and welcome. Now I send, can you build a rocket for me? It's still sending. There you go, right? Those who can do, those who can do, those who cannot, don't sing, right? So cool. And again, say my computer is not working. And once this looks okay to me, I can actually now go ahead and do two things. One, I can actually go ahead and download this source code, and maybe if I want to do further changes, I can go ahead and do that. Or what I can do is I can actually go into the channel, and I can add this bot into the various channels that is supported by Microsoft, right? So as you can see, I have all these channels available. Maybe I want to add in the teams, or maybe you want to configure with Codana. I can actually go ahead and do that. Pretty simple, straightforward, and my bot is up and running, right? All right, cool. So this is, we talk about it, and I'm going to stop my application, right? Now, recently in Ignite 2019, we also introduced a Bart Composer, right? So what you can do is, it's basically a UI-based approach, which basically you can use to build your bots. Because it's in preview, you may want to, you know, you may not want to put directly into the production, but let me show it to you. So again, it's an open source. Once you install it on a machine and start the application, it's gonna listen on a port 3000, as you can see. And now I'm gonna hit that particular port. I put the localhost 3000, and here is my bot framework composer, right? You can actually go ahead and build your Lewis. This is the another way to build the Lewis and deploy it. Um, and this is how the structure is going to be. So once you say hash help, this is going to be the intent. And these are the utterances into that, right? So it basically generates a Lewis file for you, and then use that file to deploy and build a Lewis model. Okay. The other thing I want to show you before I proceed with the Bart Framework Composer, which will be very helpful for you, is let me just go to the Lewis.ai. And I should have predefined models over here, and let me just sign in. So the whole idea of Lewis is the language understanding. So if you want to figure it out what your user is trying to say to you or what their intent is, you can actually go ahead and build this Lewis model and define the utterances, intents, and the entities as well. And what we added is, let it get slowed. What happens is, most of the time, the developers or the user ask, hey, can the bot learn over the period of time itself? So one of the thing is, we have added is, let's say I've opened a existing Lewis model and go into the build, and I can review the endpoint utterances, right? So all the conversations that are coming over here, it's basically the Lewis model is basically going to capture some of it, right? Or probably all of it, right? So if I load more, I should have more. Now the whole idea over here is you can actually go ahead and let's say I'm getting some utterances like adaptive thought, right? It says it basically aligns with the support intent with the 19% accuracy. But what I can do is if I want to add this utterance with any of the other intent, I can go ahead and do that. Or I can say this is belongs, if someone calls adaptive card, it doesn't mean anything, right? So it should go on to the none intent, and I'll just go ahead and approve it, right? So this is basically, we added to improve the app's performance over here, which is very helpful. So if you have a Lewis model, which is connected to your bot, I would highly recommend you time to time, just go ahead and look onto these endpoint utterances, just to have an understanding of what kind of messages your users are trying to send it. And then if you feel that these messages or those utterances are relate to any of the intents, go ahead and attach it with that, right? Rather than manually typing it. Okay, now that's there. Let's go back to the bot framework. We came here because we landed into the Lewis. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'll just go back into the home. You can actually go ahead and create a new bot either from the scratch or maybe from a template. And I've already created one. So let's say I'll say I want to start creating with Sakuni Maker and a Lewis from a template. I'll click on next. I can give a name to it. I'll say India demo session, and that's the location. That means whatever code that has been generated by the bot framework composer, it's basically going to create a project over here, right? Now, I'll just go ahead and provide a description and then say next. Right. So now I have my bot created with Lewis and with Q&A Maker, and as you can see, it basically going to trigger on the welcome message, and you can it's going to say welcome. You can type help to learn more, or if you want to change, you can change it over here. So whatever you're going to change over here, it's basically going to respond back to you, right? Now, once you click on the help, it's going to start a new dialog, and then if you want to add new trigger or new dialog, you can go ahead and do that as well. So let me just go ahead and start a bot over here. And it is asking me for a Lewis primary key because as you have seen, it has some intent and utterances. So what I can do is let me just go back onto my Lewis website and take a authoring key from here, which is, I should take this one. Oh, yeah, this is the authoring resources. I should take this, provide that, and it's okay. And now it's going to publish my Lewis model, and how my Lewis model is going to look like. This is how it's going to look like. right? And we're going to see an example one once it gets deployed. Okay, so now you can say it's started, and let's just test it in an emulator. Okay, let's cancel this, and you can see now the first thing is welcome. You can type help to learn more, right? So as soon as I say help, right, it's basically providing me more information, right? What the bot can help. This is kind of a driving the conversation, right? So that your user should not ask the random questions. Okay, so it basically says, okay, you can say buy a Surface laptop, where to buy a Surface laptop. So I can say, okay, let's say, where can I buy Surface laptop, right? And you can say it basically is the response that I get it over here, right? So if I go back to my Lewis and go back into my apps, I should have, there you go. That's the model that has been created. So if I open that model, go into the build, and you can see it basically the same intent and the utterances you will find over here. So these are the intent by surface, and you can see we have all the utterances and the entity is also defined. So if I go back into my bot framework, these are, you see, these are the intent and the utterances. So what happens is it's deployed it as a model and gets connected to it, and then it's driving the conversation. So if I provide any unrecognized intent, for example, I'll go back over here and say, can you build rocket for me, right? So it doesn't get anything out of it, right? Which is expected. Okay? So that's the idea. And then once it's, you said, okay, this is fine, you can download the source code, which is in your directory when we are creating it. And then it can actually, you can do the changes and deploy it back onto the Azure. All right. So I think now I have some time for Q&A. That's pretty much I want to show it to you. And the other thing is, if you are building a bot, look on to the new skills and as well as the virtual assistant solution accelerator templates as well. Now in build 2019, we have showcased the partnership that we have did with the BMW, where the BMW has the bots integrated in the car dashboard, where you can interact with the bots and do the various tasks. For example, you can send a meeting request or set up an appointment, right? There are some pre-built skill which can help you to get the intents and the entities, and then you can actually go and connect to any of these like for example Outlook APIs, and then set up a calendar invite over there, right? So these are the pre-built skills, and you can build your custom skills as well. As I mentioned earlier, do not put everything in a Q&A if your user intent is to search any information. If you have a lot of information within your organization through which user wants to use bot to make that search happen, instead of using on a website or a mobile app, what you can do is you can look for the Windows, the Microsoft Azure AI search, right? And just a quick things on that is, if you've seen this website, it is basically builds on the Azure AI search. So it has a lot of files of the John F. Kennedy's assassinations, the case investigation reports. So if I want to find some information, it basically does the AI search and figured out that information from all types of documents. It doesn't matter whether these documents are handwritten, typewriter written, computer written, or maybe some information is there on the image, in the image metadata tags. It basically provides that information back to you, right? It also can go into the exact location of the document where that finds that information, right? So that's pretty cool. And then you can actually go and look for all the connections between Oswald's and various incident that happens or the personality that it attached to, and you can look into that information as well in the graph, right? So the whole idea is you have a lot of AI services available. If you want to use with your bots, you can easily go and do that. But your judgment is which service you're going to use is depends on what the user are looking for, what is the business requirements are. Okay. Now with that, I think I'm done with the demo and the presentation, and I'm sure you're probably gonna at least gonna try with building some bots which can do very basic stuff within the organization, maybe HR bot or finance bot. And now I think we are open for any questions you guys have it. And let me just share my contact information just in case if you want to connect with me and have any questions or feedback. Feel free to let me know. So now I'm going to take questions and let's see. Oh, okay. Let's see. Now I need to scroll. There are a lot of chats over here. Let me see what are the questions. Okay, this is fine. So okay. There's some audio problem. Okay. Is there any language restriction while feeding the documents to the KB? So once you define, I don't know whether you remember when we are defining the service, you can actually go ahead and define the language. So yes, you're probably gonna look for the supported language for the Q&A before you commit anything to your user. Can we localize the Q&A bot? I'm assuming you're talking about, hey, can we, so let's say I'm sitting in New Zealand and New Zealand language is Maori. So can we go ahead and localize that? So you can actually go ahead and do that. So, you know, behind the scenes, you can use the Microsoft Translator APIs, which can do the job for you, right? So every conversation you're going to have, you're probably going to translate it first before you're going to do anything else with that. Is there any language restriction while we feeding documents? I think we did that. Once you make the bots API deployed and make it running, is it possible to call it by any external API without simulator also? If yes, how? Because it's an API endpoint, you should be able to call it from any of these applications. Yeah, I mean, if you're asking me how you can call through the APIs, I'm assuming you're pretty smart of doing it. So probably open the Postman and make an API call to that endpoint and see how it goes, right? But you should be able to, because it's just an endpoint, you should be able to do it. But the simulator provides you much more capabilities, right? For example, the tracing of the calls, right? If you're doing the API, you're probably not going to get that information for the debugging and the troubleshooting purposes. How can we integrate adaptive cards in a bots to make conversation more rich? Oh, that's pretty easy. I mean, that's out of the box. A bot framework provides you, and there are tons of samples available how you can integrate it. So it's pretty simple, and there are a lot of samples, step-by-step guides available for that as well. How can we make it a multilingual? Again, I would recommend you to use the translator API in between the user and the bots. And are you recording this session? I'm sure it is. How is the costing calculated for the bots API? Oh yes, so recording is happening. The administrator just told me. Costing calculator for the bot APIs. So the one thing is I think it's a call. It's basically based on the app service plan, you know, that you choose. So because it's an kind of a web app that you're going to deploy, and it's basically open an endpoint for you. So whenever you're going to make a call, behind the scenes, whatever Azure web app plan that you have used, it basically going to consume pricing on that. Having said that, when you design and deploy a bot, not only look for, if you're looking for the overall cost of the bot projects, now look about the other APIs and the storage that you're using with the bot solution as well, because that's gonna add up the price of your solutions. Okay, but specific for the calculation of the pricing for the bots is through the web app plan that you have used while you are deploying your bots over there. How do we deploy the bots onto the Azure portal? So if you're doing from the Visual Studio, then, or maybe the Visual Studio Code, you can actually easily go ahead and do that. I mean, from the Visual Studio Code, you can just publish it onto the web app, existing or a new one. The other thing is, if you want to do from commandlets, you should be able to do that as well, right? And from a Q&A maker, we have seen we have the options available. We can directly click create a Q&A, and it automatically that for us. So those are the options that are available for us, and I think we don't have any further questions. So, oh, you're most welcome, Prajot. Can you upload the source code in the GitHub or any repository so that we take a reference of it? Oh yeah, I'm gonna do it by today or maybe tomorrow morning, and you can get it from. I should put it up on a chat as well. The link for that. So if you go to aka.ms and say get code, that's where the code repository you will get it. Is there any cost for storage? Bala Raju, I'm not sure about it, which storage that you're talking about. So for example, if you're using behind the scenes blob storage or Cosmos DB or SQL for storing any kind of information, you need to look for the cost for each of these services that you're using. But then, yes, if you're using the storage, the cost will be associated with it as well. All right, cool. So I don't see any questions. So I'll stay for 1 or 2 minutes more. Oh, where we can get the BMW sample as you referred. That's a good one. I can provide you right away. If you can hang on for a minute, I can provide you that information. Just give me 1 quick minute. And if you look for the Microsoft Virtual Assistant Solution Accelerator, you should be able to get that as well. So, but let me just get you that as well. I'm doing some search, by the way. Just give me 1 minute. Virtual Solution Accelerator. And okay, go ahead and have a look into this. I have just put up a link in a chat window. So if you look into that, it has a video as well. What all that virtual assistant can actually go ahead and do that, and talks about the BMW case studies as well. And it should able to give you a reference of the code as well. But if you don't get it, feel free to just drop me a note, and I'll be more than happy to provide you that as well. Right? All right, cool. I'm just gonna hang on for a couple of more minutes if you guys have any questions. All right, thanks guys, and happy building bots, and have a great time ahead. Take care.
Thank you, Sudhir. Thank you for your time.